Karen.
Yes.
If I asked you right now, right this second.
Right this second.
If you feel you are truly living your purpose, would you have a solid answer?
I would have a solid answer.
Really?
Yes.
And the answer would be?
No.
Okay. Well, you're in luck then, because today's guest has cracked the cosmic code on authentic awakening.
Ooh.
Now, let's just say it's not about quitting your job to sell crystals on Etsy.
Okay.
I mean, unless it is.
That's a lot of computer work, though.
Right. Well, today we're diving deep into the sacred, the psychedelic, and the seriously strange, from the transformative power of plant medicine to dodging the spiritual equivalent of a multi-level marketing scheme, or cults.
Oh.
We're covering it all, so if this starts to feel like an ayahuasca ceremony crossed with a TED Talk, don't say I didn't warn you. Karen, don't panic, but this just might be the episode where you find out what your soul's purpose actually is, or at least how to stop pretending like you already know it. The Skeptic Metaphysicians starts now.
My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
so we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something
Anything.
that will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Hey there, I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
Welcome back to an episode of the Skeptic Metaphysicians that is not to be missed. We are fortunate to have a guest here to help us answer one of life's biggest questions.
Biggest question.
The question is, am I truly living my purpose? Now, Kara Goodwin is the host of the Soul Elevation podcast, a skilled energy healer and a meditation guide whose work bridges the worlds of ascension, spiritual awakening, energy healing, and even extraterrestrial connections.
Ooh.
She's also the author of Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living, a powerful guidebook for anyone ready to ditch spiritual imposter syndrome and start living a deeply aligned, authentic life. And whether she's guiding people through transformative practices or exploring the mysteries of consciousness, Kara's mission is clear. She's here to help us elevate our souls and align with our highest potential. I am thrilled to welcome Kara Goodwin to the show. Kara, nice to see you today again.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. We had so much fun when you were on Soul Elevation, and I'm so excited to join you here on your platform.
Right. We've got a lot to dive into because we covered a lot in your show, but now we want to cover the real good stuff on our show. So
We covered some really good
for our
stuff.
show.
Karen's story still stays with me about waking up and having all the guidance, and we covered some great ground.
We did.
Yeah. And so if you haven't listened to our episode of Soul Elevations, we definitely recommend you do that, and we'll send out a link so you can hear it. But in the meantime, now we are here to answer the biggest questions of them all, right? The life's purpose. So let's just start that big. What does it actually mean to have a true soul purpose? Like, is it to sell crystals on Etsy?
Well, it's such a great question. And of course, it varies from person to person. But a lot of times what I find when we're going through a spiritual awakening is that we feel that our life has to change 180 degrees. And to some extent it does, because our whole perspective changes. You know, when we start waking up out of the surface level mainstream, what we've been sold and what most people in this change us. You cannot help when your perspective has changed for the world to be different. You know, just by the very virtue of your perspective changing, because you're the one that's living through your perspective. Yeah. So when you're looking at through one facet of a prism, and then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, there's a whole other way to look at everything. It's very eye-opening. But a lot of times people think that then that means, okay, now I have to, like, my 3D job is no longer relevant. I need to go and shift what I'm doing. I need to be a healer, or I need to sell crystals on Etsy. I love that. And thank God that there are people selling crystals on Etsy. I'm very grateful for that.
Yes, definitely.
But it's a lot of people confuse their career with their purpose. And which I totally get, because we spend a lot of our time on our work, right? So it can be very tempting to say, like, I'm just going to ditch the whole thing. But our purpose is not necessarily how we make money. And I think that's a big shift for people, where I love when I see people who are working in, they've had a full-on spiritual awakening and they're still a mail carrier for now. They're still, I had a guest on who jokes, because now he's a psychic medium and he is doing that full time, but for a long time he was a mail carrier. And he says, I was delivering messages like during the day and spirit messages at night, when he was kind of had a foot in both worlds. But it really is this ability to walk with a foot in each world. And I think that there is great opportunity there, because if everybody who had a spiritual awakening then turned their back on mainstream society, turn their back on working an office job, for example, where would we be? Like I feel that there is a community of souls, a big community of souls who is here on the planet right now, and we're scattered. We've incarnated together over multiple lifetimes. We are mission driven in terms of raising the consciousness, but we're intentionally not all in one community, in one space, in one location, sequestered off, so that we can live here on earth in the way that we want to. And it's such a delicate balance, because it is our lives. So if we're stuck in a job, in a relationship, and with friends and we can't see a reflection of how we feel in anybody, that is a hard place to be. So it's not saying stay stuck. It's not saying, because it's too hard to say. That's why. So I'm not saying stay stuck because you have to be in service in this way and you have to be miserable because that's your mission. It's not that at all. We continuously use our circumstances to feel our way, navigate our way through life. And it may be that it's most appropriate for us at this juncture in our life path to have more of a mainstream job, but that doesn't mean that we don't keep nurturing that spiritual awakening. There are so many resources out there right now, and we have the internet, which gives us, access to that spiritual nourishment really easily. Think of how many episodes you guys have of the metaphysic. There are a lot of words I can't say right now. The skeptical metaphysician. And people can be accessing that in their free time, and it is helping them to shift, and it's helping them to nurture that awakening, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to turn their back on their whole lives. And another, thing that I think another place where people get stuck is, they may be a certain amount of the way through their lives where they have a family, they have a spouse, they have children, and they may feel like, wait, I'm the only one who's awakened in my house, and feel like there are people who do then run off to a cave and, go and leave their family and go and join a group. And I would just really, really encourage anybody who's feeling like that to deeply consider 360-degree ramifications of that. Because while that may feel like it's going to create wholeness in some part of us, if we think about your life's purpose, your karmic ties, the trauma that you create, the waves of trauma that you create through abandonment, we want to see a complete picture and really, really be sure when we're stepping away from something that we have participated in creating that would have deeply traumatic impacts on people.
Right.
And I do like how you say, you stress the importance of it. You don't have to quit your job or your one life, because I think that's a big fear that a lot of people have. If they start they're starting to wake up, they're starting to see and understand different things, they feel like, well, I have to leave this and become this other type of person. But that's not the case. We're all supposed to wake up it's like to amplify who we are. And part of, your job might be providing for your family or, teaching children or whatever. So I do think it's important to know that it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Exactly.
Well, and an argument could possibly be made for staying in place so that your example will help awaken others in that space that would not have had that example had you decided to remove yourself from the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that there are more resources like our podcasts or, just go online, you'll see that it's not just the, crazy old lady that lives with all the cats down the street. It's the doctor and the accountant and the lawyer and the pharmacist and the stay-at-home mom. Like, everybody is starting to have these awakenings. And I think the internet, it's good and bad. But I think one of the good things is that you can find other people in that situation. You can be connected so you don't feel so isolated, which awakenings can often lead to.
Right. And that's not to say that having a lot of cats is crazy.
No, I love cats. We just need a bigger house and a dog that wouldn't eat them.
That's true. Yes, our dog would. Very hungry dog.
Because how fun would it be to have a lot of cats?
Quite. I settled for one, honestly. But all right. So that's beautifully said. That's a lesson that a lot of people really need to organically ingest inside themselves, because there is a big push towards picking up and going somewhere. Now, there is sometimes an occasion when a spiritual awakening happens that is so debilitating because it is so impactful in so many ways that someone might find it necessary to take some time for themselves to find a way through. But there are people there that can help with that, and when it comes down to it. So, but now your book, you talk about it, your book is called Your Authentic Awakening, right? And you talk a lot about the importance of authenticity. Can you tell, why is it so important to be really authentic when you're going through things like this?
Yeah, there are multiple ways that we look at this. And one of the ways is something that you touched on in the beginning, which is kind of following in the footsteps of others or spiritual organizations where we, and this was part of my path so I do have more of a culty experience, and then I have the sort of spiritual organization that helped me get kick-started. And I don't see that one particularly as a cult. It was definitely alternative kind of spirituality, but it wasn't, I wouldn't say that it was like particularly culty, but it did have a guru, and it was teaching. I was in this organization to help me learn how to meditate and get my feet in terms of spirituality that wasn't wrapped up in religion. And I remember so many times them talking about how this path was without dogma. That was a problem with religion. There's so much dogma in religion, but there wasn't dogma in this path. And yet, each step I took, I was sort of like, there's so much dogma here.
Of course there is.
It was
of course there is.
And it really, one example of that really is crystallized in my mind with it was I had discovered the Enneagram. Are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Kind of a personality assessment sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I had heard about it, and I asked one of the elders in this organization if he had heard of the Enneagram and if he thought it was useful. And, at this time I was really like very conscientious of, is this going to take me off my path type of thing?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And he said, well, Master didn't teach about the Enneagram, so why would I pursue that? And just shut me down. Like, with just a like, don't even look at that. Just keep your blinders on, because we're only going to be focused on the things that the guru talked about. And the guru died died in 1952. So they were keeping his lineage alive through the talks that he gave, 100 years ago and between, 70 and 100 years ago. And so it was dogmatic, it was like, well, sure. I'm only going to put energy and value into things that are part of this path, and I'm not going to explore anything else. And this is a great, big, wide universe and so much has come about since, even in this century, much less the latter half of the last century that they're just disregarding. And so what I had found, and what ultimately why I left that group, was there really wasn't a lot of room for growth. It was just this rehashing and rehashing and rehashing of the same material, and looking at it from new ways. Of course, this thing popped up in my life, this new experience. Now, how do I apply this to things that this master had said in their teachings? And there is value in that. But it did get to the point where I just felt like I was in this tight spiral of like looping and looping and looping. And it was like, but I think the Enneagram's fascinating. I want to know more about myself from that angle. And what about Reiki, which wasn't around when he was alive? And, I want to explore that. And I want to explore, like, he never talked about aliens. Maybe I want to learn about aliens. All of these pieces of my spiritual path now, because I let go of trying to fit into somebody else's box of saying, this is how you awaken, and this is what is valuable and not valuable. And so that is one of the ways that I see the importance of authenticity. Is we all have like a soul signature or a soul blueprint, however you want to think about it, a soul frequency. And it's unique to us. And we have it based on our experiences before this life. And this life that we've been living all these years has also colored our soul, and our soul has colored it. But when we enable ourselves and give ourselves the freedom to say, what brings me joy, what brings me excitement, what interests me, and follow that, that is really what's going to help us to keep finding what is relevant to us and to keep growing, rather than to always be, looking around at, okay, well, that person seems further along than me. So what courses have they taken? What courses are they offering? What methods do they use? And there is some of that is still valid, because we are all helping each other. We are walking each other home. That beautiful expression that was it Ram Dass or
Ram Dass.
Yeah. We are doing this together as a community, and we are offering, a hand back to the people who want to come forward, and we are accepting the hands of those who can help to lift us up also.
Right.
And we have these unique expressions of who we are, and we will find so much purpose and joy in our lives when we take the cues of what lights that spark within us. And that helps us to express ourselves as that true soul.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time on the show. How our fingerprints are uniquely ours. How can we expect everyone's paths to be uniquely the same, right? Or the same when we strongly believe that our spiritual paths are very independently different and unique to each person. There's that the whole tenet of one truth, many paths. It's sometimes people need those. I don't want to say crutch, because it's not really crutch, but those aids where there's a structure and you follow the structure. You have a roadmap to where you need to go. However, there are those, and I would say maybe it allows more of a, I don't want to say the wrong thing because I don't want to offend anybody, but sometimes people need those roadmaps, and sometimes you need to go off the beaten path in order to find your own path, and you chunk a bunch of things together, and that makes who you are. There was a time when I was in meditation, felt this message come through that united all these different things, like the astrology, numerology, enneagrams, all these kinds of things, human design, all these kinds of things that were imprinted on us the minute we were born, because we were meant to say, here's all the different dimensions of you, pick which one makes sense so that you can understand yourself. And that's how we move that thing forward. So that's the tenet of New Reality TV. The whole reason we're doing New Reality TV, the way we're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, you just don't know what's going to resonate with someone else. I think the good thing about the structured spirituality, whether you want to call it religion or a cult, because the cult doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing.
I would posit that religion might be a cult itself.
They are actually. Yeah. That's one of the first things they teach us in anthropology.
Oh, really?
But people get offended by that. So it's just basically everyone having the same belief system and following a certain set of practices. But I think for a lot of people it can be a good starting point. Sometimes you don't know what you need until you're in a situation where you're getting what you don't need.
Right.
And it can be like, oh, well, in theory, this sounds interesting, but it is not resonating. So I'm going to look for something else. Right. Or it can help. I mean, there are some really wonderful people that are just true believers of whatever spiritual body or organization that they're with. So I think there can be good and bad for both. I think the problem is so often in any sort of organized spiritual system, whether it's religion or a traditional cult, if you want to call it that, there are often those players that like having that power. Yeah. They like feeling important, and that becomes their driving force. Yeah, no. And we've seen how that's happened in the Catholic religion and other organized religions.
Yeah, so I feel so attacked right now, but okay, we'll move forward. I'm just kidding.
Like, why?
I'm just kidding. All right. So we all agree of one thing, and that is that spiritual awakening is really an individual thing. It doesn't, whatever tool you need or you find that resonates with you is the way that you should go. However, there are those out there who are just starting on the path, who may think, is this a spiritual awakening? Is it not? And so what kind of signs what kind of signs would you say someone should look for to identify whether or not they are perhaps going through a spiritual awakening?
What a great question. And it's another one of those, such an individual thing. Classic spiritual awakening is like, is your life falling apart right now? Right. Or has your life recently fallen apart? I know that was the awakening path for me, where I had, I was very sure about a lot of things. I was kind of just riding the surface of life and enjoying myself. And then I just had tragedy after tragedy after tragedy of people that I'm very close to, whether that was them dying, having heart transplant, being hit by a motorbike when they crossed the street, having surgery on their brainstem, being diagnosed with a brain tumor, all of that happening within like 7 months. And these are people that I'm very, very close with, like family. So for me, I just got into like this whirlwind of tragedy where I just couldn't recognize my life anymore. And I felt like it felt like I needed to hold on to something, because I felt like I was just whipping around in the wind. And it was like, what's going to be next? You start to get in this like trauma cycle of like, I don't want to answer my phone, because that's like, people will text you unless it's really bad news. And then they want to call you. And it almost became a joke of like, well, I don't want to answer that because it's my dad and he's calling. And then it would be like, and then it would literally like, I'd answer the phone and I'd be waiting for the bad news. And then I would get terrible news,
It's like, waiting for the other shoe to drop and realizing you're a centipede. That's a lot of shoes.
Yes, I love that. So a lot of times that is what kickstarts somebody's spiritual awakening. And it is, I think, from like a spiritual perspective, at least speaking in my case, I feel like the time was really right. I came here to experience a certain way of living life and looking at life and radiating myself. And I wasn't doing that on my own. And so looking back, it does feel like it was very purposeful for all of those things to happen in such a concentrated time, where I just felt like, because I just wasn't getting, I can see now there were little clues of like trying to get me to, have the space to be able to experience myself in a more spiritual way. And I was like just distracting myself. But, it also can just be that you're becoming interested in these things, and there is something called synchronicity. And I know that you guys are very familiar with synchronicity, but when you start to feel like the universe is talking to you, and maybe you're hearing over and over similar concepts that are new to you. So let's just say, everything is energy. And somebody starts talking about how everything is energy, and you've never really thought about that before, but it does make sense. And wow, if that's true, then what does that mean? Like, I've been limiting myself because I've been experiencing everything as like either solid, liquid, or gas. But if it is true that everything is energy, then how does that change my limitations? And what is possible that I have believed is impossible? And maybe then you're just, everywhere you turn, it feels like people are talking about how everything is energy. And it's like just getting you thinking more and more about reality in a different way. And that's just one example, but there may be different ways that the universe starts to talk to you to say, like, here is a new way of looking at things. Here are some glimpses into what reality really is under the surface of what we've been fed. So I mean, those are just a couple of different ways, but and for some people, it's just this, they've just felt this their whole lives, but they've gone along with the mainstream and they've gone along with what they've been taught. I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is like how we've been conditioned and we've been programmed, and it's been, society does it just by virtue of being in society. Schooling does it by virtue of being in school. We're being molded and programmed, and our family does it, and the media does it, and I mean, you guys, thank goodness you're creating like this, true platform where people can explore a different view of reality so that, we can have an alternative to what the mainstream is telling us is true. But all of these ways are ways that we've been programmed. But there are a lot of people who, from the time that they've been born, something has felt not right, but they've just been going along with it because nobody else is talking about things in a different way. And then that starts to get stronger and stronger when the time is right. We can never force the rose to bloom, but once it's ready, there are so many different ways that it can express.
So what I'm hearing you say in the crux of it all is just pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
pay attention.
Some of these things can be tricky.
Yeah, oh yeah, no,
and
it's very
you
subtle.
Won't realize, until it breaks your leg in Europe.
Right, which may or may not have happened actually. But I always say the universe starts with a whisper in the wind and ends with a 2x4 to the head.
Yes.
Or the ankle.
Or the ankle, yes. Right. Well, something that people are turning to more and more to do a spiritual awakening is plant medicine. And I know that you have some experience with this. So how can someone know for sure whether or not plant medicine is something that they should turn to look at their spiritual awakening process, or if it's just the fad that's going around now? How does someone discern between those two?
That is such a great question. And it's
Yes, 2 in a row.
Yes, good job. But it dovetails so well into what we're talking about, because some people do, like, I know of people who just kind of, they get curious about something like Bufo or mushrooms.
I can't imagine licking a frog. I just can't imagine that. But
Well,
anyway,
I don't
sorry.
think you have to. I think you can. I don't know if they smoke it. I mean, but I don't think. I don't. Well, I
Smoke
don't
the frog?
know. No, the whatever they get from
That's
the frog.
a big rolling paper they got to find there.
I think I was assuming that they didn't. There was no actual live frog involved, but now you got me questioning. I don't know.
Welcome to the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
But,
no.
like, I know people, for instance, who have done like very hardcore, like psychedelic experiences, and they did it more from, for lack of a better term, for a party reason. You know, like they just wanted to experience like an alternate consciousness, but more in a party sense, and then just had their whole world rocked, where they're like, oh, I've got to sell all these things that I thought were important, but I don't care about that stuff anymore, and it's that's a silly thing that I'm letting go. And so it really kind of unexpectedly had an awakening impact on them. And then there are a lot of people who are, you know, going to South America, going to Central America, having ayahuasca ceremonies. I don't personally have experience with ayahuasca, but I do know that so many people have really beautiful, valid awakening experiences where they're just experiencing reality in a different way. They're seeing into the matrix. They're experiencing, you know, spirits that are coming to them and talking to them. But it's tricky territory for many reasons. You know, one, just being you're very, very vulnerable in that state. And so, you know, you're going to a foreign country, you don't know the shamans. The shamans are wise to, you know, there are a lot of people performing this who aren't actually shamans. And you're not only vulnerable in just your physical, but it's an energetic experience. And there are people who know how to manipulate energy for their, you know, which is for their gain and for your loss. So that is just something to definitely be aware of. I wouldn't go out and listen to stories of ayahuasca and just take them at face value and think like, yes, this is the path. I'm one day into my spiritual awakening and this is step 2. You know, this is going to be my day 2. You know, you really want to be mindful and cautious, but it can be a great tool. Now, I personally have experience with mushrooms sometimes, and I've had some beautiful experiences with that. But what's interesting, because I am going through my own sort of personal change with regards, if we want to call it plant medicine. So I live in Indiana and you can't get THC. It's not illegal. Like you can't even get it. I don't think you can even get it for like medical. But you can get CBD. And so I have had experiences where I've taken some CBD at night, but it does have THC in it. So this is where I get confused, because I'm like, well, it says there's THC anyway. So like, so that's why I'm only saying that because of the plant part. Like I consider it plant medicine, even though I'm taking like a gummy or something. But I don't know if it's because I have had a couple of experiences with mushrooms that really opened up my psychic perception in terms of being able to see like very psychedelic. I mean, it's a very psychedelic experience, but there are plenty of times where I have had CBD, and then in that space, like between wakefulness and sleep, called the hypnagogic state, I have had very psychedelic experiences, but without psychedelics. One time it actually happened, somebody had given me like a bar of mushroom chocolate, and I had it in my bedside table drawer, and I hadn't taken any of it, but I started having psychedelic experiences.
Oh, just by having it.
Just because it was in my field. Like it was nearby. Like it was very close to my body, but I hadn't actually ingested any of it. And I was like, this is so powerful. Why am I seeing this? And I was like, I've got those chocolates right there. That is so weird.
Right. And we only just found out that there is such a thing as mushroom chocolate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's an interesting
Yeah.
thing.
So how can you discern, like if someone is going to an ayahuasca retreat and they've done all their research and this is a good one, how can you tell if what you're going through is actually a spiritual situation or you're not just tripping on the drugs?
I mean, is it exclusive from each other?
It can be, I would think.
No, I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
that's a great question. And, I mean, I think that's a bigger question about how do you discern spiritual experiences from, generally, like if you're experiencing something in meditation, how can we be sure? This goes to the imagination versus the true experience. And that was a line for me for a long time where it was like, is this my imagination? And not necessarily, again, like not necessarily with ayahuasca or with plants or anything, but just even in meditation or in a dream, like I would have a dream and I would feel like, God, that was so real. And I was with this person who passed away and, they gave me a hug and I felt them, like I could feel them when I was hugging them. They felt solid. And yet I was dreaming. Was it a dream or was it like a special dream? And it was an either or. And that's something that through my spiritual awakening, I've softened that either or, where it's like the imagination and our perception is so powerful. And when we try to say like, is it this or this? Was it real or was it my imagination? It's like, well, what is your imagination? Your imagination is real and it is connecting you. But what I was doing was shutting off these things that could have been really great experiences because I was like, I think it was just my imagination. And then, it's like, it's taken me some time to like soften that, like just the imagination and be like, what is my imagination leading me to?
And we have a propensity to try to explain away everything. Right. So it's just my imagination. So that's our knee jerk. We go to that automatically. But the more that you start, we talk about it all the time, the more you suspend your disbelief and you allow magic to happen, you open yourself up for more magic to happen. And then more synchronicities happen and more coincidences that we call little miracles, right? Karen calls them little miracles. And if you I no longer, I used to always say, oh, there's got to be valid explanation for this and find the scientific way to explain it. I don't do that anymore because I now just enjoy the magic.
Yes.
And that's thanks to her.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, it's like going to a magic show. It's so cool. Then you find out how they did it, and it's not that impressive anymore.
Yeah.
The awe is gone.
In fact, there's this thing that happens when I meditate now. It used to happen to Karen. I don't know if it still does know, but I'm seeing these colors. Like I'm seeing purple.
Yeah,
right?
you're seeing the colors?
I am.
Oh, good.
I am. And so,
Sorry.
so everything inside me is going, okay, I need to research. What are these colors that I'm seeing in my head? Like, and scientifically explain them. But I stop myself from doing it because I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the experience. I'm allowing my mind to think whatever it wants to think about it and just going with it. And it's beautiful. It's really fun to have happen.
That.
So, yeah.
Well,
it's very cool.
and kind of bringing it around to Karen's thoughts about like, well, how do you know if this is real or not? And this is kind of where that evolution is happening for me with the CBD because it's so much easier for me to have these experiences, these metaphysical experiences at night. I don't know if it's just that it's helping me to stay in that in-between space because I don't fall asleep as quickly, and or if it's actually helping my focus in terms of there's, you know how you focus your eyes and you, depending on the distance of what you're looking at, your focus changes. Well, in your inner sight, that is also happening. So it's very similar to how your eyes focus, but it's like the chaos and noise of the static that you see behind closed eyes. When I start to have these experiences, it starts to organize and there starts to be structure in the chaos. And then I start seeing these energy patterns and and I'll get insights, downloads. Usually I'm not seeing like form. I'm not seeing people or landscapes. Usually it's energy patterns, and they're moving and changing. And depending on how I focus, that inner focus depends on what I see. You know, I might see space. I might see just like, it's like I'm in space. I might see it more like I'm in a dome, and I'm seeing columns, very like mosque/cathedral like senses at different times. Lots of seeing like toroidal fields from the side, and it's moving, which also has it like psychedelic tree look to it also. So it's been one of those things, because I enjoy those experiences so much. It was like, oh, well, CBD helps me to be able to experience these more. And then I guess it was like 2 months ago now, maybe, I had a really strong dream. And I won't go into the ins and outs of it, but essentially, I got to this gatekeeper and in the dream, and I was looking for my passport, and I only had expired passports, and I couldn't find. And this guy was like so nice; he was such a great guy. And I was looking through my backpack, and I found all these gummies, these red gummies. And I had two handfuls of them. And I said, do you have like a bin? Can I put these in your bin? And he like handed me this bucket, and I put the gummies in the bucket, and then I kept looking. And there were a lot of symbols in this dream. So it took me a while. And actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of Robert Moss.
I have heard the name. I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with him.
So he is like this dream shaman. He's been around for a long time, and he's written a ton of books. And I actually interviewed him right after this dream. So we used the dream to kind of unpack all of this. But it had been heavy on my mind, and I kept thinking, the fact that I threw these gummies away, am I being invited to throw away the CBD? And that was how I ended up taking that. As soon as I had the dream, I stopped. I was having it like maybe twice a week or so. Because the downside, I can't remember my dreams when I take it very easily. And so I was like, well, I like to remember my dreams. I like to feel that I'm engaging with my dreams. And so anyway, all of that to say that I felt that the dream was inviting me not to do that anymore. And so it's been interesting to see what I can, quote unquote, what I can do when I don't have that aid. And I am having experiences where I am still seeing those things. It is a little bit harder for me. But I am like, oh my God, I am doing it without the aid. And so, but I do feel so much that it served, it helped me to carve. What I feel like is happening is that I've carved these pathways, and I can get to these states because I have these pathways carved, and I no longer necessarily need that aid to be able to take me there. So it's interesting how these things evolve and how they can be valid aids until, but then we might kind of graduate out of them, and maybe they'll become an aid again in the future. But it does really seem that right now it's important for me to not.
Right.
Yeah, it does sound like that you were being told you don't need this.
Yeah.
It does. Well, we all know the power's inside, right?
Yep.
It's within. So, okay. So we are quickly running out of time. So I want to make sure that we take some time to talk about your show, because we were you graciously invited to be guests on your show. We had a wonderful time. Now your show talks about all kinds of stuff, right? The name of the show is the Soul Elevations Podcast. You explore some really cosmic territory, right? Like ascension and ET contact and energy healings, all kinds of stuff. How do all these threads weave together in your show, in your work?
Yeah, it's a really appropriate question, because for a long time the podcast was called Meditation Conversation, because when I started it back in 2018, it was really around meditation. And then after a couple of years, I started having much more consciousness-based conversations. But it took me forever to change the name, because I liked the rhythm of meditation conversation. But eventually, I mean, literally it's just been in the last few months that I changed the name to Soul Elevation, because the conversations are really focused on the broader consciousness. And I'm not really talking about meditation. I haven't for a very long time. So it's like both of like, if you want a show that's going to talk about meditation, this is not your show. And if you don't want to listen to something because you're not interested in meditation, this could be your show.
Right.
But it's when we think about consciousness, there are all these different threads. It's again, kind of going back to that prism where we've got a prism of consciousness, and the light that shines into it then has these rainbow fractals that go out, and that one stream might be energy healing, and one stream might be ETs and how they're helping us with our spiritual development, and one might be alternative health and healing. And so, but the common factor with all of it is that we are more than the physical, and we are more than our minds. And there is something that is connecting all of us. And if we really utilize that, we can be so much more than what we think we can be. And so that's really the core of what I like to explore on the podcast.
Nice.
And here I thought E.T. just wanted to phone home.
He wanted out of here.
You're on a roll today.
All right. So if someone, and I've been listening to your show, and sometimes you do interviews like what you did with us, and sometimes you do solo shows where you actually impart messages and lessons for people to learn. Is there a particular person that you think would be most appropriate to listen to your show and really truly have some good takeaways from?
Yeah, anybody who is going through spiritual awakening, and there are, like we've been talking about this whole time, there are different levels of awakening. There are different ways that we awaken. Some people, for example, awaken, back to an early question, some people awaken because they realize, they go more the conspiracy route, for example, where it's like, and sometimes that's related to like a medical thing where they do a deep dive and they're like, wait, why don't we do it this way? Why are we having to take pharma, pharma is being shoved down our throat, but there are these other legitimate things. And then you kind of go down that rabbit hole and there's some really gnarly stuff going on there. And that makes people start to question their reality. I appreciate a good conspiracy as much as the next guy, but it's not really, like, I don't really go down those rabbit holes on the show so much. I've had guests like JK Ultra, who is amazing. I love her. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she, JK Ultra, like MK Ultra, so she is very like conspiracy heavy. I've had Ruben Langdon on. That's kind of his thing too. But I don't really like all of those discussions are more spiritual in nature than conspiracy. So I would say, you're not going to find a ton of that kind of content, but really around more of the empowerment. My issue with conspiracy is that a lot of times it makes us feel so disempowered. Right. And so even though I love it, I can feel it within myself of like, oh, I'm starting to feel hopeless. I'm starting to feel drained. I'm starting to feel like, like the deck is stacked against me. And so I prefer to keep my attention, in other places that make me feel more empowered, because that is really important. Empowerment is a critical component to our ascension.
No, definitely. Couldn't agree more with you on that one. All right. So whenever we have a guest on the show, every once in a while, we like to throw some curveball questions at them just to see what comes out. If you would be okay with doing a couple of those, I've got a couple here ready to throw your way. Okay, so here we go. Here's the first question. If your spirit guides ran a podcast, what would it be called, and what would the first episode be about?
Oh, what a great question. It's funny because before we started recording, Will and I were talking about, because Karen changed the temperature, and we were talking about how when the energy gets really like big and you're having deep conversations and you're feeling like spirit is coming in and maybe speaking through you or definitely influencing your thoughts, it can make you hot. And so you were sharing stories about that. And I was like, yeah, I just hosted a workshop last night and oh my God, like I got all red and I was sweating and but it felt like it felt so palpable that there was presence there beyond myself. And so I do feel that I work closely with my spirit team. And I do feel that they helped me to change the name of the podcast recently, like I was talking about, from meditation conversation. Like that seemed to be more of a suggestion from outside of myself because I'd been not interested in doing it for so long. And then it just was like all of a sudden, like on a dime, oh, I'm going to do it this way. And so many things lined up to support that happening all at once where I had that idea and then different, for example, the imagery that you see behind me with the geometry, sacred geometry, like that came in right when I was rebranding everything, but it was completely a coincidence, so to speak, but different things like that where it's like, oh, one of the first episodes I have under the new name, it's got a different backdrop and there's, lots of things changed all at once, but not by design. So the answer to your question, I would say that they would call it soul elevation because I think that's the name they wanted. Right. And then, what seems to feel really relevant to a lot of the content, a lot of times my conversations come back to, don't forget you've got this support on the other side. You've got this team that is backing you up. Don't forget about them and call on them. And so I think that would be an easy first topic that they would want.
Okay, that's a great answer to that question. Okay, here's a second curveball question. And I love this one, but you're probably going to hate it. So. If authenticity had a smell, what would it be and why?
Oh, gosh. For me, it's a woodsy smell.
Okay. Yeah.
And I...
Like patchouli.
Yeah. Or like cedar.
Okay.
But I get that what I immediately saw was like the bark of a tree.
Right.
And so I think I would have to pick that apart a little bit to like, how that happens sometimes where it's like, well, here's my answer. Now let me see if I can figure out why that's my answer.
Right.
But I think maybe because there is just something so grounding and so present with like a wooded area or trees, there's that stability. There's the network, the tree network that's happening under the ground where they're all communicating in this really mysterious way for us on the surface of life. Let's go with that. Let's go with woodsy, cedary.
I like it. Karen, you're a big smell person. What do you think it would be?
Chocolate.
Chocolate? Maybe mushroom chocolate?
Yeah, I was kind of taking it apart too. Like, okay, well, cocoa. Or cacao.
Cacao.
Is, what they used in the ancient civilizations for different ceremonies. So that was always very important. Yeah. And now that we're trying to make this more palatable, we're mixing it with sugar and milk. And, it's a lovely feeling that you get when you eat chocolate. It popped into my head.
Right. Because cacao is bitter, actually. The actual cacao is actually a bitter taste.
And it was very limited. Only the very special people could have it.
Right. The royalty.
So now it's like, get your little Hershey bar.
Right. That's not real chocolate, though, right?
I know.
I mean,
but
it is.
It's a tasty
It's
treat.
amazing, yeah. All right, Kara, this has been wonderful. If someone wanted to A, listen to your show, or B, reach out to you to have a deeper conversation with you, what's the best way for someone to reach out?
Well, you can go on the podcast website is Soul Elevation Podcast. You can reach me through there. And I have another website that is karagoodwin.com. I spell Kara with a K. And I'm on Instagram is kind of the one that I'm on the most. That's Kara_Goodwin_meditation.
Okay. We're going to add direct links to all that in our show notes. So if you didn't have a pen at that particular point in time, you still want to connect with Kara, just go to skepticmetaphysician.com, go to her episode page. You'll see all those links laid in there directly. So it's easy to say, hey, Kara. All right. If there's...
I don't even know what to say to that. We were all waiting. Hey, Kara.
Yeah.
What?
No, that was
Hey,
it.
Kara.
That's it. That's it. Just a quick hello. All right. Is there anything that we haven't talked about you want to make sure that the audience definitely gets from a takeaway from our conversation?
I think I would just I love to reiterate where we kind of left things when you asked about if my spirit team had a podcast, and the focus would be you have assistance on the other side. And I think that it can be really tricky because there is so much invisible happening that's influencing us that we can tap into and let those beneficial helpers really connect with us. And everybody can do that. And it does take some subtle perception. There are some things that you can do to help to be able to perceive those subtle energies better. But even if you can't perceive them, it starts with trust. It starts with faith. And so I would just encourage everybody to know that you can strengthen that and then play with that and let your team in on this physical experience.
All right. Beautifully said. That's a perfect way to end the show. Kara, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. I know we'll be in touch for much longer.
Definitely.
And I look forward to listening to more of your shows.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.